There are roads that people avoid because of accidents. There are roads that people avoid because of wild animals. And then there are roads that people avoid because something far more disturbing waits there after sunset. This story was shared by a sound technician named Ethan Mercer. In the spring of 2023, Ethan worked for a well-known event audio company. His team traveled across different cities, setting up massive sound systems for weddings and celebrations. The work was exhausting. Long hours, heavy equipment, sleepless nights. But the money was good, and the team had become like family. On April 17, 2023, Ethan and 8 co-workers finished working at a wedding in the city of Ashbrook. The event had gone smoothly. Guests danced until dawn. Music echoed through the venue all night. As the sun rose, the crew began packing everything back into their cargo truck. Speakers, amplifiers, lighting rigs, power generators. Everything was loaded carefully. Their job was done. All they had to do was return home. But around noon, their manager called with unexpected news. Another company vehicle had broken down near a distant city. The equipment from that event needed to be collected before returning. The crew wasn't thrilled, but they agreed. It was only a few extra hours of driving, nothing unusual. After loading the truck, they grabbed lunch and rested for a while. By the time they finally started their journey, evening had already arrived. The sun was disappearing behind the hills. 9 men sat inside a heavily loaded cargo truck. Some joked, some listened to music, some stared out the windows. Nobody felt worried. Nobody felt afraid. They had no idea they were driving toward a place feared by truck drivers, police officers, and local residents alike, a place known as Black Hollow Valley. Their driver, a man named Logan, became unusually quiet when he noticed the highway sign pointing toward the valley. Ethan noticed immediately. "You okay?" Logan kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah," but his voice sounded uncertain. One of the other crew members laughed. "What happened? Ghost stories getting to you?" Logan forced a smile. "You can laugh if you want." The truck continued forward. A few miles later, the landscape began to change. The forests became thicker. The mountains grew taller. The highway narrowed. Even stranger, darkness seemed to arrive much faster than it should have. The sky still held traces of daylight, yet the valley ahead looked almost completely black. A cold wind struck the truck. The large canvas covering the cargo area rattled violently. Then they reached the entrance. On one side of the road stood an old shrine. On the other stood another weathered monument. Between them sat a rusted sign, Black Hollow Valley. The truck crossed into the valley. Immediately something felt different. Street lights along the highway began flickering. Bright, dim, bright again, then dim, over and over. The crew exchanged nervous looks. No one said anything. A few minutes later, Ethan's phone rang. The call came from Marcus, one of the workers sitting in the cargo section. Ethan answered. "What happened?" Marcus sounded irritated. "My mobile data is finished." Ethan laughed. "That's why you called me. Recharge it." Still smiling, Ethan opened his payment app. He entered Marcus's number. Then something caught his attention. The date displayed on his phone screen. His smile vanished. The screen showed April 17, 2020. Ethan frowned. That couldn't be right. Today was April 17, 2023. 3 years later, he refreshed the application. The date remained unchanged. April 17, 2020. A strange feeling settled in his chest. He checked again. Same date, same year, 3 years wrong. For several seconds, Ethan stared at the screen. Then he shook his head. Maybe it was a software bug. Maybe the network was causing problems. Trying to ignore it, he completed the recharge and put the phone away. But the uneasy feeling remained. Outside, the darkness continued growing thicker. The forest seemed endless. The flickering streetlights continued flashing like warning signals. And somewhere deeper inside the valley, something was already waiting for them. Watching. Waiting for the truck to come closer. Waiting for them to stop. Because within the next few minutes, the crew would encounter a woman standing alone beside the road. And that single decision to slow down would turn an ordinary drive into a nightmare none of them would ever forget. The truck moved deeper into Black Hollow Valley. Nobody was talking much anymore. The jokes had stopped. The music had been turned down. Outside, the forest looked endless. Towering trees surrounded both sides of the highway. The flickering streetlights only made everything feel worse. The cold wind continued slamming against the canvas covering the truck. Even Logan looked tense behind the steering wheel. Then suddenly one of the crew members pointed ahead. "Who's that?" Everyone looked forward. About 300 feet away, a woman stood beside the road. She was holding what looked like a cloth bag. Her head was lowered. One arm slowly waved toward the truck, as if asking them to stop. The entire highway was empty. No houses, No vehicles, no lights, just that woman, standing alone in the darkness. Logan slowed down. What's she doing out here? Nobody had an answer. As the truck approached, the woman continued signaling for help. She never raised her head. She never moved from her position. Something about her felt strange, but nobody could explain why. Finally, Logan pulled the truck to the side of the road. The vehicle came to a stop. He lowered his window. Ma'am? The woman slowly stepped closer. Her face remained hidden. Her voice came out low and distorted, almost like two people were speaking at the same time. My village is ahead. The crew exchanged confused looks. Logan frowned. There's no village around here. The woman didn't respond. She simply repeated herself. My village is ahead. Please take me there. Her voice sounded wrong. Not human. Not normal. A chill ran through Ethan's body. Meanwhile, in the cargo section behind them, Marcus called Ethan again. Ethan answered immediately. Before he could speak, Marcus whispered in a panicked voice. Tell him to drive. What? Drive right now. Ethan sat upright. What's wrong? For several seconds Marcus didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking. I looked outside. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. And? Marcus sounded as though he was about to cry. That woman doesn't have feet. Silence filled the truck. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. What? Her legs and below the knees. She's floating. A cold wave rushed through Ethan's body. His hands began trembling. For a moment he couldn't even speak. The others noticed his expression. What happened? Ethan leaned closer to the driver. His voice barely worked. Logan. The driver looked at him. Yeah. Ethan swallowed hard. The woman. What about her? Ethan forced the words out. Drive. Logan stared at him. What? Just drive. Something in Ethan's face made Logan look toward his side mirror. The woman was still standing beside the truck. Motionless. The driver focused lower, toward her legs, and instantly his blood ran cold. There was nothing beneath her knees. Nothing. No feet, no shoes, no movement. She wasn't standing on the road. She was hovering inches above it. The woman slowly raised her head. For the first time, Logan saw her face, and what he saw made him slam the window shut. Hold on. The truck exploded forward. The engine roared. The vehicle accelerated through the darkness. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Every person inside understood one thing. That wasn't a stranded traveler. That wasn't a normal woman. Something had been waiting beside that road, and they had stopped for it. The truck sped through the valley. The crew hoped they had escaped, but less than a minute later, something even worse appeared ahead. Something standing directly in the middle of the highway. And this time, they wouldn't be able to avoid it. The truck raced through the darkness. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back. Every man inside was trying to understand what they had just seen. A woman with no feet, floating beside the road. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Yet every single person had seen her. The truck continued deeper into the valley. Logan gripped the steering wheel tightly. His knuckles had turned white. The road ahead twisted between towering cliffs and dense forest. Visibility was getting worse. The flickering streetlights had almost completely disappeared. Only the truck's headlights cut through the darkness. Then suddenly Ethan noticed something ahead. His heart skipped a beat. A figure stepped onto the road, directly in front of them. Logan. The shout came too late. The driver slammed both feet onto the brake pedal. The truck screeched violently. Tires screamed against the pavement. The heavy vehicle skidded sideways. Everyone was thrown forward. The truck narrowly avoided rolling over before crashing into the rocky hillside beside the road. Silence. For several seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The engine continued idling. The headlights illuminated the road ahead. Ethan's chest rose and fell rapidly. His heartbeat thundered inside his ears. What was that? Nobody answered, because they had all seen it. The same woman, standing in the middle of the road. But this time she wasn't alone. A small child stood beside her. Both figures had appeared out of nowhere. The road had been empty only moments earlier. Now they were gone. Completely gone. As if they had never existed. Logan slowly wiped the sweat from his forehead. His entire face was pale. Then a voice came from the cargo section. Someone was screaming. The crew immediately jumped out of the truck. Several men rushed toward the rear compartment. When they pulled back the canvas cover, they found one of their co-workers clutching his head. Blood covered his hand. During the sudden stop, he had been thrown against the large generator inside the truck. A deep cut stretched across his forehead. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious enough to require immediate attention. The group gathered beside the truck. Nobody wanted to remain there. Yet they had no choice. Their friend was bleeding. They needed to help him. Using their emergency kit, they began cleaning the wound. The forest around them remained completely silent. No insects, no birds, no wind, nothing. The silence felt unnatural, as if the valley itself was listening. Then it happened. A loud mechanical noise suddenly echoed from inside the cargo section. Everyone froze. The generator. It had started by itself. The machine rumbled for several seconds, then stopped. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every eye remained fixed on the truck. A few moments later, the generator started again. This time it ran longer. The engine growled loudly inside the darkness. Then it shut off once more. The crew stared at each other. The generator wasn't connected. Nobody had touched it. There was no reason for it to start. Yet it had. Twice. Fear spread through the group. One of the younger workers stepped backward. "I don't like this." Neither did anyone else. Then another sound emerged. A sound far worse than the generator. Soft crying. A woman was crying somewhere inside the truck. The sound came from behind the equipment. Low, broken, heartbreaking. Every person standing there heard it. The crying slowly grew louder, and louder, and louder. The men stared into the darkness inside the cargo section. Nobody wanted to investigate. Nobody wanted to move, because deep down they already knew something terrifying. There was no woman inside that truck, yet someone was crying, and whatever was making that sound was getting closer. The sound continued. A woman was crying somewhere inside the cargo section, soft at first, then louder again. Every member of the crew stood frozen beside the truck. Nobody wanted to look inside. Nobody wanted to discover what was making that sound, because they all knew one thing. There was no woman in the truck, only speakers, generators, cables, equipment, nothing else. Yet the crying continued. One of the workers grabbed Ethan's arm. "Tell me you're hearing that too." Ethan nodded. His throat felt dry. Every instinct was telling him to get back inside the truck and leave immediately. But the injured worker still needed help. Nobody wanted to abandon him. The crying suddenly changed. It became deeper, more painful, almost as if someone was mourning. The sound echoed through the valley. The forest remained completely silent. Not a single insect made a sound. Not a single leaf moved. Then one of the workers began shouting, "Stop it!" Everyone turned toward him. The man looked terrified. He started yelling into the darkness, cursing, screaming, demanding whatever was there to leave them alone. The others immediately tried to stop him. "What are you doing? Shut up. Don't do that." But he ignored them. His voice became louder and louder. The moment he stopped shouting, the crying stopped too. Instantly, the silence returned. For a brief second everyone felt relieved. Then a new sound emerged, a sound that made their blood run cold. The crying had moved. It was no longer coming from inside the truck. Now it was coming from somewhere behind them, very close. A few of the men slowly turned around. Nothing was there. Only darkness. Endless darkness. The sound continued for several more seconds. Then it vanished completely. No crying. No footsteps. Nothing. The valley became silent once again. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew what they were dealing with. Logan finally stepped forward. His face looked pale. "We are not staying here." Nobody argued. The injured worker's wound had been treated. The truck was still operational. There was no reason to remain in that place any longer. Before getting back inside, Logan looked at every member of the crew. Listen carefully. The men stared at him. "We stay together." Everyone nodded. "We pray?" Again everyone nodded. "And no matter what happens, nobody tells me to stop this truck." The group quickly climbed back inside. The cargo doors were secured. The engine started. As the truck rolled forward, several members of the crew began reciting prayers. Soon the others joined. The sound filled the cabin. The prayers became louder, stronger. The truck continued through the valley. Minute after minute passed. Nothing appeared beside the road. Nothing stood ahead. The crew slowly began relaxing. Maybe the worst was over. Maybe they had escaped. Then Ethan's phone vibrated. A notification appeared on the screen. He looked down and instantly felt all the warmth leave his body. His phone now displayed a completely different date. Not 2023, not even 2020. The screen showed a year that had not happened yet. A future date, a date several years ahead. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. His hands began shaking. Around him, other crew members started checking their phones too. And within seconds, terrified voices filled the truck. Because the impossible wasn't happening to only one phone anymore. It was happening to all of them. And what the screens were showing made everyone realize something horrifying. The valley was not just haunted. Something inside it was interfering with time itself. The truck continued moving through Black Hollow Valley. The prayers echoed inside the cabin. Nobody wanted to stop. Nobody wanted to look outside. After everything they had already experienced, the crew only wanted to leave the valley behind. Then Ethan checked his phone again. The date had changed. His stomach dropped. A moment ago it had shown a date from the past. Now it displayed a year that hadn't even arrived yet. For several seconds he simply stared at the screen. Then he showed it to the others. "What does yours show?" One by one, the crew members pulled out their phones. The reactions were immediate. Confusion, fear, disbelief. Every phone displayed something different. Some showed dates years in the past. Others showed dates years in the future. One phone displayed a date nearly a decade ahead. Another showed a year that had already passed long ago. None of it made sense. The network signal was gone. The internet wasn't working. Yet the dates kept changing. Every few seconds the numbers shifted again. The crew became increasingly uneasy. One of the workers turned his phone off completely. When he restarted it, the date changed again. Another tried switching airplane mode on and off. Nothing worked. The phones behaved as though they were connected to something impossible. Ethan looked out the window. The forest seemed endless. No villages, no homes, no signs of civilization, just darkness. Then Logan suddenly spoke. His voice was low. "Do you guys see that?" Everyone looked ahead. Far down the road stood a single streetlight. Nothing unusual about that, except for one thing. The light wasn't moving closer. The truck had been driving toward it for nearly 5 minutes, yet it remained exactly the same distance away. Nobody said a word. The truck continued forward. Still the light remained there, unchanged, unmoving, as if the road itself wasn't allowing them to reach it. The atmosphere inside the vehicle became unbearable. The prayers grew louder. Nobody cared how they sounded. Nobody cared if they looked scared, because they were scared, very scared. Then suddenly the streetlight disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually. It simply vanished. 1 second it was there. The next second it was gone. A few men gasped. Others stared silently through the windshield. Logan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His eyes never left the road. A few minutes later, the valley finally began opening up. The mountains seemed less steep. The forest looked thinner. The crew felt a small amount of relief. Maybe they were finally leaving. Maybe the worst was behind them. Then Marcus pointed toward the passenger window. Everyone turned. On top of a hill overlooking the road sat a woman. The same woman. The same bag. The same posture. The same lowered head. She wasn't walking. She wasn't moving. She was simply sitting there, watching the truck pass. The distance between them had to be several hundred feet. There was no possible way she could have reached that location before them. Yet there she was, waiting. The crew stared in complete horror. Nobody spoke. Nobody even blinked. Then the woman slowly raised her head. The truck immediately entered a curve in the road. For a moment the hill disappeared from view. When the road straightened again, the hill was empty. The woman was gone. Every person inside the truck saw it. Nobody tried explaining it. Nobody could. The truck continued driving. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, lights appeared ahead. Real lights, buildings, vehicles, a fuel station, civilization. The valley was ending. The crew had survived, or at least that's what they believed, because waiting for them ahead was a terrifying explanation. An explanation involving decades of murders, disappearances, and something that locals had feared for generations. And once they heard that story, everything they experienced inside Black Hollow Valley would begin to make horrifying sense. The moment the truck left the valley, everyone felt it. The pressure was gone. The air felt normal again. The darkness no longer seemed alive. A few miles later, the crew pulled into a roadside fuel station. Nobody wanted to continue driving. Not yet. The injured worker needed rest. The others needed time to process what had happened. The truck was parked near a small restaurant beside the highway. The crew stepped out. Some washed their faces. Some sat silently. Others kept glancing toward the road they had just escaped. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was making jokes. The events inside the valley had changed the atmosphere completely. After grabbing food, Ethan finally spoke about what happened. At first the restaurant owner listened quietly. Then his expression changed. The man slowly placed his cup on the table. "You came through Black Hollow Valley at night." Ethan nodded. The owner looked genuinely concerned. "That was a mistake." The entire crew fell silent. The owner pulled a chair closer and sat down. What exactly happened? One by one, the crew described everything. The woman beside the road, the floating legs, the child, the crying voice, the generator starting by itself, the changing dates on their phones, the woman on the hill. When they finished speaking, the restaurant owner remained silent for several moments. Finally he sighed. "You are not the first people to report these things." Nobody interrupted him. The owner leaned back in his chair. Years ago, before the highway was modernized, that valley was one of the most dangerous places in the region. The crew listened carefully. The owner continued. Travelers disappeared there. Robberies happened constantly. People were killed on those roads. Many bodies were never recovered. The room grew quieter. The owner pointed toward the mountains visible in the distance. The forests are deep. The ravines are deeper. Some families never even found their missing relatives. A cold feeling settled over Ethan. The owner lowered his voice. Then strange stories started. What kind of stories? Ethan asked. The owner looked directly at him. People began reporting the same woman. Several crew members immediately exchanged nervous looks. The owner noticed. You saw her too, didn't you? Nobody answered. The silence was enough. The owner's expression darkened. Truck drivers have reported seeing her for years. Sometimes she's alone. Sometimes she's carrying a bag. Sometimes a child is standing beside her. The crew sat frozen. Every detail matched perfectly. The owner continued. Many people believe she died there a long time ago. No one knows the full story, but everyone knows her description. Nobody touched their food. Nobody felt hungry anymore. Then Ethan remembered something. The phones? What about the dates? The owner's face became serious. You experienced that too? Ethan nodded. The owner slowly exhaled. That's the strangest part. He explained that travelers had reported impossible dates for years. Phones displaying years from the future. Others displaying years from the past. Digital clocks resetting themselves. Vehicle dashboards showing incorrect dates. Sometimes only for a few seconds. Sometimes for several minutes. Then everything would return to normal. No one had ever found an explanation. Not technicians. Not engineers. Not network providers. Nobody. The owner stood up and walked behind the counter. A few moments later he returned carrying an old newspaper clipping. The article discussed several unusual incidents reported near the valley. Disappearances. Fatal accidents. Unexplained sightings. Strange electronic malfunctions. The crew stared at the article. Everything suddenly felt much more real. Because now they knew one thing. They weren't imagining it. Other people had experienced it too. For years. The owner folded the newspaper. Then he gave them one final warning. A warning Ethan would never forget. If you ever travel that road again, do not stop for anyone after dark. The crew stared at him. The owner's face remained completely serious. No matter what you see, no matter who asks for help, keep driving. A heavy silence filled the restaurant. Outside, the morning sun continued rising. The valley looked peaceful from a distance, beautiful even, but every person sitting at that table knew the truth. Some places look normal during daylight. Some places hide their secrets well, and some roads wait patiently for nightfall, because that is when they reveal what truly lives there. Follow Nightmare Files for more terrifying horror stories.